from the book of Isaiah, chapter 45, reading from verse 22. Turn to me and be saved, all you ends of the earth, for I am God and there is no other. By myself I have sworn, my mouth has uttered in all integrity a word that will not be revoked. Before me every knee will bow, by me every tongue will swear. They will say of me, in the Lord alone are righteousness and strength. All who have raged against him will come to him and be put to shame. But in the Lord all the descendants of Israel will be found righteous and will exult. The next reading is from the Psalms. It's from Psalm 119, reading from verse 126. It is time for you to act, O Lord. Your law is being broken. Because I love your commands more than gold, more than pure gold, and because I consider all your precepts right, I hate every wrong path. Your statutes are wonderful, therefore I obey them. The unfolding of your words gives light. It gives understanding to the simple. I open my mouth and pant, longing for your commands. Turn to me and have mercy on me, as you always do to those who love your name. Direct my footsteps according to your word. Let no sin rule over me. Redeem me from the oppression of men, that I may obey your precepts. Make your face shine upon your servant, and teach me your decrees. Streams of tears flow from my eyes, for your law is not obeyed. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
I've only got two little ones, so I'm not going to put any pressure on you, but I was going to ask you if you knew the Ten Commandments, boys. Do you know the Ten Commandments? No. Oh dear. Mummy, what are you doing? Okay. Yes, Claire. Shh, slap wrist. Okay. Anybody else can help me with the Ten Commandments then? I'll throw it out. Go on then. Shout a Ten Commandments to me. Let's see how many we can get. Shall not kill. Love your God. Sort of. No other idols. Pardon? Do not covet. Yep. Your neighbour's ox or ass. Brilliant. Anything else? Don't commit adultery. Thanks, Mum. Claire? Honour your mother and father. Both of my parents are here this morning, Joy. Do not lie. Anything else? What are we doing today? Remembering the Sabbath. Anything else? Do not steal, yes. And there's one more. It's about swearing. Do not misuse God's name. So we got all 10. When I was trying to do this on Monday morning, I got a pitiful 7 out of 10. Thankfully, I got honour your father and your mother, so Mum and Dad will be pleased with that one. It is sometimes really hard to remember the rules, and they're all up there. So no other gods, no idols, don't misuse God's name because it's holy, remember the Sabbath, honour your father and mother, don't kill anyone, don't commit adultery or steal or tell lies, and don't want what someone else has. It was hard enough for us to remember those, so I'm not going to ask you to remember the rest of the Old Testament laws about cheese and mildew and tattoos, who's clean and unclean at any given moment, who's allowed in the temple and who isn't. But all of these things are in the Bible, that God used to help his people to be distinctive from the world around them and to help them live safely as a travelling group, because they were given, as the Jews left Egypt and they were travelling around, so they needed some rules to help them to keep clean and disease-free and all of those sorts of things. So, Fran and Chris, you've already given me what Jesus said about the rules. So can you do it again? Yeah, and? Mind, yeah. And the next one? Love your neighbour as yourself. So so Jesus was talking about the rules. He was saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbour as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. We'll come back to those a bit later, but try and remember them. They're important. Rules are important for us. They make life better. But what's it like to live without the rules? I was thinking about this and I couldn't think of any examples, which is really bad. But I asked Warner and he said, why don't you talk about football? And I was like, oh yeah, okay. And then I saw in the news that yesterday evening was the 150th anniversary of the rules being written, which I thought was really, really appropriate. So think about it for a moment. What would it be like if you played football without any rules? You might never have played football before, so you might have no idea what I'm going on about. You could do tricks and turns. Is that what it's like on a Sunday when you play football without rules? Good. Okay, pleased. You can score a goal anywhere. You could tackle whoever you wanted. It could get very dangerous. It could get very messy. There could be a lot of trips to A&E in a very short amount of time. But I wondered, the other one that I thought of was what would it be like driving without a highway code? So, I know driving around Basildon, there are some people who don't understand the highway code anyway, but you could drive as fast as you wanted, you could go in any direction you wanted, and that would be very dangerous very quickly. And, you know, the NHS is already stretched, and it would make it 100 times worse. Or could have the opposite effect, but you never know. We're going to watch a parable, which is from Luke, about rules.
Once upon a time, there were two brothers that lived on a farm. They loved chasing chickens, riding horses, and pushing over the cows, man. But more than anything, they loved playing with their daddy. They played hide and seek, leapfrog, and freeze tag. Now the dad loved his boys more than anything in the whole wide world, so he gave them some rules to keep them safe and happy. The dad often told his sons that everything he owned would someday belong to them. Well, one day, the younger brother started to think about how nice it would be to someday own everything his dad had. He thought so much that his heart became filled with greed. So he decided to go talk to his dad and said,
Daddy, when will I get all the cool things that you own?
Well, man, the dad told the younger brother that he can enjoy everything he had right now, but he wouldn't own it until he died. Well, the younger brother then asked his dad a horrible, terrible question.
Daddy, could you die soon so I can get everything you own right now?
The dad was shocked and terribly sad, but he agreed to give the son all the money he would someday inherit. Man, the son was so excited that he ran off to the big city without even saying goodbye. The young boy quickly became very popular in the big city. He had lots of money and no rules to keep him from doing whatever he wanted. Man, he threw wild parties with people he thought were his friends. He ate the finest foods and slept in the fanciest hotels. Well, one day, while eating at this very expensive restaurant with all of his friends, he reached for his wallet to pay the bill, but he was surprised to find out that his wallet was completely empty. Man, he turned to his friends to see if they could help him out. But one by one, they all got up and started walking away, leaving him all alone. Well, next thing you knew, the young boy was washing dishes and sleeping in the alley behind the restaurant. The only food he ate came out of garbage cans, man. He finally paid off the restaurant bill, and he tried to find a job doing what he was good at. But the only job available was feeding the pigs. And and the only pay he got was eating whatever food the pigs didn't want. He sat in the mud and he cried and cried and cried. He realized that the rules his dad had for him were good. As he nibbled on some corn on the cob, he decided to go home and see if his dad could at least give him a job that paid him with some real food. And as he began walking up the long driveway to his home, his dad saw him and ran out and gave him this big old hug. The dad was crying tears and tears of joy because he thought his son was dead.
And the rest of the story, which is in Luke 15, goes on to say that the father had a party and the eldest son was a bit disgruntled about that. But if you want to read it, it's in Luke 15. It's actually a really good story. So sometimes walking away from the rules isn't good for us. Sometimes it feels like disobeying would be far better than following. But we know that's just not the case. In that, the young boy becomes exploited by pig farmers. Football becomes a much nicer, safer sport, doesn't it, men and some women as well, if you follow the rules that were written 150 years ago. And driving becomes a more enjoyable, less stressful experience, knowing that there are rules and you have to stick by them. I wonder if you can remember a time when you haven't followed the rules. It can be anything. Things like eating properly. I know I struggle with that one. Making sure you have the right car tax, treating others right, or obeying the rules of a new game that you might be learning. That youngest child in our story didn't want to obey the rules that Dad had set out for him. And he actually ended up, like I said, in a much worse place. Much worse than he could ever have imagined. But the good news is that even if we don't obey God's rules, he will still love us and he wants us to be safe and happy. God created us to worship him like we've been doing this morning and in our lives, and therefore to know and obey the guidelines, which means that by following the rules, we naturally stand out from the people around us who don't know them. I wondered if you wanted to have a look at the psalm again. Psalm 119, I'm going to be looking at 29 and 30. But the whole way the psalmist approaches things might have struck a chord with you this morning. You might have been wondering what's gone wrong with the world, and this is where the psalmist is coming from. He's so angry that he sees the people around him who aren't obeying the rules. You may have cried over a news situation or told God how angry you are at society and for the way that it treats the people who are on the outside. The psalmist is really not happy that the world has decided to neglect those rules and work out its own way for doing things. And although he's struggling with that, he's struggling with seeing the hurt and the pain that is caused with the wrong things in the world, he's still saying to God, make me holy. I want to be separate from the rest of the world. Make me holy. And saving from sin as well. He wants God to save him from sin. So this is verse 29 and verse 30. Your statutes are wonderful, therefore I obey them. The unfolding of your word gives light. It gives understanding to the simple. God's rules in the top half are they're exalted by the psalmist. They're wonderful. They're carefully thought out for the protection and sustainability of humanity. Even those numerous rules in Exodus and Leviticus and Deuteronomy that helped the Jews when they were travelling and then settling. But the Jews did neglect them. And the reason why we see them again and again in the Bible is because God was reminding the Jews that they needed to obey the rules to live distinctively. And time again, it's mentioned in the New Testament. the new Christians, those new people who are believing in Jesus, had to be reminded that there was a reason why they were called to be part of Christ's family, part of God's church, to be distinctive. So the two rules that Jesus gave: love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it: love your neighbour as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. They come from two different books in the Old Testament, which would be the Jewish Torah. The BBC were talking, I'll tell you this story. The BBC were talking about how people put their oath on the Bible, and the courts wanted to change that so they didn't have to do it on the Bible. And they mentioned that Muslims put their oath on the Quran, and Jewish people put their oath on the Old Testament. If you've ever spoken to a Jewish person, they don't call it the Old Testament, they call it the Torah, which means law. Sorry, that was something I was really annoyed about. So, the first one comes from Deuteronomy 6, love the Lord your God. And the second one comes from Leviticus 19, love your neighbour as yourself. If you keep reading in Matthew, you'll find, this is from Matthew 22, 37 to 40, you'll find that shortly after Jesus said these things, he then managed to silence the Sadducees and the Pharisees, the people of the law. They were like, oh, you know stuff. Okay. Thankfully, we don't have to dig out these little gems from Jewish scripture or even from the New Testament, because Jesus has already done it all. He's already said, these are the two rules, and this is where you start from to get the rest of the rules. So it's worth remembering for the future. I don't know how you feel about the Bible. I love it. I think it brings great comfort to me and to those around me, particularly seeing as all of my friends are Christian, which is brilliant. But the psalmist in verse 130, which is the second half, the unfolding of your word gives light and gives understanding to the simple. He makes it clear, the psalmist makes it clear, that just unfolding it, just thinking about it for a moment gives light. It gives more understanding to just the little things in life. It might be a daunting prospect for you to have to sit and read the Bible, but you don't have to read a lot of it in one go to understand it. In fact, I would say don't try and read it all in one go, because you'll get very bored very quickly or fall asleep. It's hard, it's difficult. I took up the challenge of reading SSBIOY, which is the Soul Survivor Bible in a Year. I did it from September 2 years ago to September a year ago. And it was broken down into an Old Testament reading, a New Testament reading, and then a Psalms or a Proverb reading. It only took about 15 minutes a day, but when I bought it and sat it down and looked at it, I was like, I don't think I'm going to learn anything from just reading every day. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. But I found that on the days when I was fully engaged in what I was doing, so I wasn't rushing to get to bed or I wasn't rushing to get out of the house, and when I actually sat down and spent 15, 20 minutes reading it slowly, it really did impact my life. I was like, oh yeah, that's how that fits together, and that's with that. So if you can find a Bible reading plan, go for it. I think it's a really good use of perhaps a year or 2 years to take the time to read the Bible all the way through. I did complete it. Some days were harder than others. Some days I didn't read it, but for all the days that I did, it made a difference to my life. And it means that I love it more, and I've got a better understanding of how it all fits together. You can already see from the way the psalmist writes and the words in Isaiah that the rules God gave are woven through the history of the Old Testament and into the New Testament. The Old Testament is quoted a lot by Jesus, we know that, and by the people who wrote the rest of who wrote the Gospels and the letters. The law was important to the new Christians, the young Christians, and it's still important for us today. Scripture and timing are something that God uses. You can't really deny it. It's there throughout the history. And it shows the importance, particularly of Jesus, in all of the different scriptures, all the different prophecies about him. My favourite one is that the Jews were in slavery for 430 years, from the time when Joseph died to when Exodus started to happen, when Moses started to speak. That's 430 years. And then there are 430 years from the time the Old Testament stops to the time Jesus starts to preach in the temple, when he says, today these prophecies are fulfilled. I think that's incredible, and it must have taken a while for people to realise that God had said, well, for 430 years you were in silence and I gave you Moses, and for 430 years there was silence and then I gave you Jesus. I think that's just incredible. So what would it look like if we followed the rules, the commandments, the statutes that are given by God and summarised by Jesus? Well, because it's hard, it makes it a big dream. But Isaiah says, before me, every knee will bow and every tongue will swear. And we've already sung that this morning. And this notion does exist in the New Testament, and it clearly still exists today. So we can't forget it. And the sentence before that says, a word that will not be revoked. God has said it, therefore it will happen. It may take its time, but it'll happen. It's important to God that his creation acknowledges him and treats his son with respect. So a world with God looks like worship, respect, and at the end of Isaiah's reading, a little bit of boasting, a little bit of knowing what we're doing through the Holy Spirit. It would be a perfect world if everybody understood and put into practice what God had said, what God says regularly. It would be a changed world, and that would be incredible. But it's not about how much you know, so you don't need to know all of the Bible, but how you apply it to your life. We know there are guidelines, we know the things we should do. Love God, love others as we love ourselves. But if we don't live by it, if we don't stand out, if we're not distinctive, then we just blend into the background. On a Friday evening with my year 8s, they're 12 years old, they were absolutely crazy on Friday night. Carol will attest to that, won't you, Carol? It was the end of half term. But for the last half term, we've been trying to teach them a little bit about who Jesus is, what the difference is between being a Christian and not being a Christian. And I can tell you that we have had some mixed reactions. They are 12, they have got their own opinions already. But they're asking questions and they're seeing relationships grow that are a little bit different from the relationships they might have with their friends, or they might have even with their own parents. We know that having a relationship with them is important, and we trust that God will use those young people who we see regularly on a Friday night. We trust that they will then go out, God will use them in what we're teaching them, what we're saying to them regularly, and they will be an example to their friends. There's absolutely no denying that the Bible, in all of its different forms, from the shortest verse to reading every book in the Bible, has an incredible impact on the world that we live in today. It glues communities together as a shared resource. It builds individuals up, and it teaches and spreads the light of Jesus to the world on a daily basis. I recently heard from someone at Mayflower School that they've put the Bible on every iPad that they've got, on every tablet that they've got, because it's useful for RS. Who would have thought? It makes homework easier for religious studies. Who would have thought that the Bible could do that? And obviously we're very blessed that we've got Shirley Gowland, who's doing Bible in literacy with our primary school children as well. So it works at home and it works abroad. Today is Bible Sunday, which means it's a celebration of all of the lives that have been changed by the Bible, all of the lives all of the people that are working towards translating the Bible into the probably millions of dialects and things that we've got in the world, the ways that we communicate. And it's to pray as well for those who are distributing the Bible in places where it's illegal or dangerous to own one. And we're just going to watch a brief video about China.
This is a rural area of Henan province in China's heartland. The nearest city is about an hour's drive away. People here are poor, earning less than $150 a year from their wheat and corn crops. Many of Henan's 3.8 million Christians live in remote rural areas like this and find it very hard to get Bibles. That is why hundreds of people from the surrounding areas flocked to the church in this small village when they heard that a Bible distribution van would be visiting. The van was welcomed into the village like a celebrity. Bible Society representatives handed out 700 Bibles to rural Christians. For many, it was the first Bible they had ever owned.
For many of the Christians who are owning the Bible for the first time, especially in the villages, in the rural areas, you could see tears in their eyes, you could see, joy and gratitude. Some of them would come up to me and to us to thank us for giving this precious gift of the Bible. I mean, I've met people who have been waiting for the Bible for the last 10 years, 14 years, and they're precious.
So there are people in the world who have waited 10 years, 40 years for a Bible. My life, I've always had Bibles. I've always had something to read. I've now got, I wasn't going to bring them all because that makes me look really sad, but I've got lots of different versions of the Bible. But it doesn't matter what version I read. if I don't live by the words inside of it, if I don't live by what God is telling me to do, I will just fade